Friends, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you joining us online, at this time we are going to begin the memorial service for Michael M. Grossman. For those of you in the sanctuary, if you have a cellular phone or a pager, we would ask and encourage you to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. And officiating today's services will be Rabbi Jason Fenster from Congregation B'nai Jehoshua Beth Elohim. And as we begin our service today, the rabbi will lead the family in the tradition of Kriya.
We're gathered here to remember, to say words of blessing, to share stories, so that Mike and all that he was and all that he gave, that his legacy, his memory might become a blessing. Loss is always hard. And we know that in this moment, it's made all the more difficult because of the reality we're all living through as a human family. And we're here. Whether you're physically present in this sanctuary or joining us via Zoom, we're here. A community, a family has gathered to do something important, to speak truth, to speak words of inspiration and love, to remember Mike, who gave so much to each of you, and to whom you gave a lot as well. And so we will speak ancient words of prayer and poetry. We'll share. We'll remember. And through our work together this morning and in the weeks and months and years that follow, Mike's memory will surely be a blessing. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing. From foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until, looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. In moments like this, our people, we turn to the Psalms, to biblical poetry, writings that speak to the depths of the human experience. Not to say that anyone feels in this moment exactly the way that you feel right now, because your experience of this moment is unique. But just to give voice, to try to find language or imagery to help us connect to something bigger than ourselves. In particular, we're accustomed to turning to the 23rd Psalm. It's language that we know. It speaks about the valley of shadows. Maybe that's where you are right now, sitting in a valley of deep, dark shadow. That's okay. Now's time for that. We can sit there for a little while. But I think we often forget the end of the psalm. The last stanza, it says that goodness and mercy are following us all the days of our lives. But the Hebrew, it doesn't just mean follow, it means chase. We're being pursued by goodness and mercy, by legacy and memory and blessing. While we sit in the valley of deepest, darkest shadows, we are chased with the memory and the blessings that urge us forward towards light and to life. Right now we're in the valley. That's okay. And eventually we'll leave. We will find straight paths, memories that nourish and sustain. We will see that the cup runs over. The cup is full. Joy and blessing, legacy and memory. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, Bihinot dashe yar bitzeni, Al mei menuchot yenahaleni, Nafshi yeshovev, Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo, Gam ki elech Begates al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, shivtecha umishantecha, hima yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Neged sorerai, Dishanta bashemen roshi, Kosi revaya, Dishanta bashemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed, yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. Ach tov v'chesed, ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני, לאורך ימים. 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, you will remember him. When you're weary or in need of strength, you will remember him. When you're lost or sick at heart, you will remember him. And when you have joys you yearn to share, you will remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mavarach. God has given, and God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. God gave. God gave Mike and all of the gifts and love that he had to share with each of you. And there aren't words to describe what it's like to have him taken away. And nonetheless, we say words of praise. As I just said to the family, not to say that God has some master plan that results in the loss of people we love, but to remind ourselves that even in the midst of loss, there is something bigger and deeper that we can connect ourselves to. And so we share stories. We share memories. Zecher, remember. And that Hebrew word for memory, it doesn't just mean remember, it also means to mention, to speak. That memory isn't supposed to just live in our hearts or in our heads. Memory must live on our lips. We have to speak memory into being. Sometimes we share the big, life-changing stories, and sometimes the little moments that we've told 1,000 times, we tell them again and again and again and again so that memory can be made manifest, and so that memory can become a blessing. And so we'll start that today. And surely we will continue for the weeks and months and years ahead. And we know that his life and legacy will stretch far beyond any of our lives as well. So now we'll start. Begin by inviting Mike's cousin Rob to come share some memories.
Thank you, Rabbi. After talking about how significant the speeches are, it's a great honor and stressor to be the first one who speaks after that. Last week, my family posted a message to Mike that read like this: "Some heroes wear capes. Our hero wears sports jerseys. rockin' sunglasses, and really big shoes. That's you, Mike, and we love you tremendously. Thinking of you and sending you a full-throttled hug. Mike did indeed have a larger-than-life personality, one that felt the joys and struggles of life perhaps deeper than many of us. But we are here today to recognize, to appreciate, and to share those smaller moments that made my family's relationship with Mike filled with mutual love, respect, support, and devotion. Rhonda and I were fortunate to be able to visit Mike when he was at Brookdale, and we had some valuable conversations that I'd like to share with everybody. Mike continued to express his gratitude for all of our times together and how we had all continued to help and support him over the years. We answered by thanking Mike for everything that he has done for us, our children, our entire family. We let Mike know how thankful we were for the gifts he has given to us. He was incredulous. He just couldn't wrap his mind around the idea that what he had given to us was as valuable as what we had given to him. I hope he had the opportunity to truly process our gratitude for all the intangible gifts that we have been so blessed to receive from Mike. Here are some examples. Mike would come to visit us at least once a month before we moved, and we'd of course center the visit around a feast fit for kings. The table would be covered with hamburgers, chicken breasts, chicken sausages, French fries, and of course, ketchup. He would devour everything, calling it delectable. What a gift to us, especially Rhonda, who didn't often get such compliments on her cooking. No one else would declare a meal delectable. These heartfelt words, which many of us would be too shy or too self-conscious to share, were true gifts. Mike made us feel completely appreciated and loved with his typical unadulterated praise and gratitude. We were the lucky ones to hear such beautiful words. During Sari's sophomore year at Iowa, we took Mike to a football game. He never once complained about our lodging, an old barn attached to a farm in Amish country. Not exactly Mike's style. He looked at me like I was crazy when I asked him if he wanted to walk around the farm and see the different animals. It was so cold at night, we had to switch rooms and give Mike the master bedroom, and we went and slept in the bunkhouse with Zach. Mike's excitement and exuberance for the Hawkeyes was palpable to everyone around him. We all know Mike loves sports, of course, but for that day, nothing was more important than Iowa beating Wisconsin. Unfortunately, the footnote is they did not. He put his entire essence into Iowa football, and all because Sari was a Hawkeye. You all know I'm not a sports fan. I went to the games mostly to root on the marching band. But that day, I was really able to love football, to love the Hawkeyes, because I followed Mike's lead. Later that night, we joined Mike in watching the Cubs clinch the National League Championship at Buffalo Wild Wings. I think the place probably ran out of Diet Coke that night. For the first time in my life, I was a baseball fan. Mike was yelling with excitement and high-fiving all the other patrons, and I joined in with him as well. His spirit and joy was infectious. It's something I never would have done with anyone else. I told Mike during our visits that I'm thankful to him, not just for sharing his love of sports, but for his demonstration of how high that love can take us. I don't remember many of the details of the game or the stream of trivia that Mike always had at his disposal, but I remember his complete and unconditional devotion to the championship in front of him, just as we remember his complete and unconditional devotion to all of us. Mike has always supported my family. During our last visit, he made sure to ask how things were going with my job at Charles Schwab. He wanted to know how Rhonda's middle school speech team had done at the latest tournament. We told him nobody ever asks us how our jobs are going. This was always the case. If I was ever late for a Mike dinner, due to an emergency at work, he understood. He assured me that work sometimes had to come first, and he never said an unkind word regarding it. Mike prided himself on always being the first person to wish me happy birthday. To ensure that he was the first, he would call me a few days ahead of my birthday. I would joke every single year that he was 360 days late, and he would insist every year that he was early and he was the first. Mike would have it no other way. He needed us to know that he cared and valued what we do outside of what we did for him. And I'm thankful that he cared so much. Lastly, and most importantly, Mike was a great big cousin to our children, especially Zach. He and Zach would share hugs that lasted not seconds, but almost minutes. I wish I had timed them. His love and support for our family was boundless, and he was not afraid to share it. We let Mike know how valuable he was to our family and how thankful we were for his tremendous love that he shared with all of us. To best honor Mike's incredible spirit of gratitude and his deep belief in the power of family and friendship, I'd like to thank some very special groups of people. To those of you that knew Mike through the DePaul sports program, I'd like to thank you for all you did to support and encourage Mike in the decades that you knew him. DePaul was certainly family to Mike, and our family is grateful to you. Next, I'd like to thank all of you from Timothy O'Toole's who came to know Mike and embrace his love of sports and celebration. O'Toole's became a second home to him over the past many years, and we're grateful to you for welcoming him. Mike valued his friendship above almost everything else, and nothing brought him more happiness than being with friends who accepted and supported him for his true and authentic self. Many of you met him at Matt's place, Cannes, where Matt and many of his staff emphasized the importance of Mike just being himself. Matt and his staff always supported Mike's love of sports, conversation, and a cold Diet Coke or orange juice. Many of you stayed friends with Mike and gave him your time and energy, which was of the utmost importance to him. Thank you for the many years of your friendship. There are so many of you out there that meant the world to Mike. You were his second family, his champions, his loudest cheering section, and I'm grateful to all of you. Mike, like most of us, wanted to give back. I saw this in the enduring loyalty he showed to my family. I hope our conversations over the years, and finally at Brookdale, showed Mike how much he had given to our family. I hope he came to understand that it wasn't about money, prestige, or stature. We loved Mike and valued Mike for the devotion, support, and of course, the love he had for all of us. We will hear this morning about Mike's numerous accomplishments, and I won't list them now. But I will say that his greatest accomplishment is that he showed us all the value of who we are, deep inside, and how we should all be true to ourselves and not defined by others. By extension, we didn't have to pretend around Mike. Today is a very tough day, and it will be followed by many more to come. I hope we can all take some time and lean into our love and into our memories, and remember all the intangibles, the priceless and the remarkable gifts that Mike gave to us. We are richer in the ways that are most important because of these gifts and because of Mike.
Lynn.
I am standing here today as a proud older sister of Mike Grossman. His legacy will be the stories we all tell about how he's always found a way to live a full life on his own terms with no regrets. Mike entered my life when I was 6.5 years old, a beautiful baby, 10 pounds, 2 ounces, 2 deep dimples, and a smile that never, ever quit. Qualities that made Mike special throughout his life were evident even when he was an infant. Mike always found interesting ways to keep his beautiful mind active. An unshakable spirit, courage, a unique sense of humor, and his amazing memory. Fast forward to now. When you look at Mike's life from the outside in, the first question you may have is, how did he do it? During one of our last conversations at Brookdale, I asked Mike a version of that question. His responses reminded me of a few lessons that the Miller family learned and will take into the future. When we talked, I said, Mike, you are a walking miracle. What do you want people to remember about you? Mike said, from the time I was this high, I didn't know there were things I wasn't supposed to be able to do, so I did them anyways. I learned early on not to be a victim or even think about being a victim. I just had to keep going. There's a backstory behind Mike saying, from the time I was this high. Everyone here knows Mike was on the autism spectrum. What you probably don't know is that Mike wasn't born that way. Being on the spectrum was one of those many things that just happened to Mike. Mike grew up in the 1970s before being on the autism spectrum was a thing. But what's cool about this is that because of Mike, he and thousands of children after him received the right to a quality education. Our parents fought for this. Multiple trips to Springfield advocating for Mike, resulting in getting legislation passed for students with special needs in Illinois to be included in the classroom. That was the beginning. After that, Mike participated in a number of mainstream camps and sports leagues throughout high school and college with his sidekick, Gary. Enough backstory. What I really want to share with you today are lessons our family learned from Mike. Lesson 1, show up for everything and everyone. Mike's commitment to showing up for family set a great example for our children, Adam and Erica. He found it easy to attend every possible family event and any job by memorizing the public transportation schedules that would enable him to get there on time. Mike made toasts to Erica on her bat mitzvah and to Adam on his bar mitzvah, and he was the first one, as you have now heard, to wish them a happy birthday. No matter where in the world Adam was, Mike found him, even in Israel, to wish him a happy birthday. I have no idea how he did that. When we had a party to introduce our new family members, Dan, who's here with Erica, and Michelle, who's Adam's now wife, Mike was the first to welcome them. Because Mike traveled from the city on public transportation for every family event, Adam was inspired to do the same. What makes this interesting is that Adam doesn't ride on Shabbat. But that did not stop him from walking from my mom's house to attend his cousin Zach's bar mitzvah 3 miles away in 100-degree weather. Lesson 2, make sure people know they are important and appreciated. One of Mike's greatest gifts was his ability to speak from the heart. When the Spirit moved him, Mike would make a point to remind us of something we did that mattered to him. Many times. When we arrived at family gatherings, Mike made a point of spending time with Michelle and Dan and the rest of us. But what was interesting was that he greeted us right at the door and made sure we were seen and heard. Lesson 3, enjoy as many moments as possible. Mike, my son Adam, and my husband Jeff shared a common interest in sports. Adam learned from Mike to love what you do and make time to enjoy the moment, even while working. Whenever Jeff and Adam went to White Sox games, they made a point of looking for Mike to say hello. During the Bulls championship years, Adam and Jeff would go to games and sit in the level where Mike was selling tickets, and during breaks, Mike would hang out with Adam and Jeff. Lesson 4, be compassionate. Mike being in my life was a constant reminder about the importance of compassion towards others, especially parents who face challenges with special needs children. The last lesson Mike wanted you to know was how important it is to have loyal friends. What kept him going throughout the years and in these last few weeks were his friends, Kristen, Kelly, Jill, Megan, Andy, and I'm probably missing many others. In Mike's words, when I was with my friends, I could be myself. He also wanted you to know this. I'm in the same shoes as people who are in every minority or have a physical handicap. So many people are experiencing discrimination. I want more for them. At the beginning of my conversation with Mike that day, I told him he was a walking miracle, and I asked him, what are you most proud of? The stories I shared are things he wanted you to know. There's one more thing he said. The hardest thing is when you run out of miracles. Mike truly had a beautiful mind, and as they say in sports, he left it all on the field. His legacy will be the stories we all tell about how he always found a way to live a full life on his own terms with no regrets.
The problem with going third, everybody's already said a lot of things. Mike's had a full life, so there's plenty more to say. In preparation, when I was third, I brought more stuff. It was this week, approximately 44 years ago, on March 19th, 1977, my brother Mike stood before a congregation and read his bar mitzvah. So I thought I would start by sharing an actual representation of how things went back then in our house. Many years ago, my father wrote a book called Michael. He never finished it. As I read through the typewritten pages, I found the section about the decision process around Mike's bar mitzvah in my father's own words. One evening after dinner, while we were lingering over a cup of coffee discussing the day's events, Joan said, "There's something we need to discuss." Those familiar words only meant one thing. She's been waiting for the right moment to bring up a potential controversial subject. Whenever Joan felt she needed to sell me on something, she waited for just the right moment to spring it on me. I said, "Is there something wrong?" She said, "No, not really. Michael's 12, so we need to start planning his bar mitzvah." I said, "Shouldn't we first talk about whether or not a bar mitzvah is a good idea for him?" She said, "Of course he should have a bar mitzvah, and here's why. By having a bar mitzvah, at least Mike will have one experience that normal 13-year-old Jewish boys would have. It will give him a sense of achievement, and with his memory, he will have no difficulties learning what's required of him. So he will have a bar mitzvah, and we will do what we have to do to figure out the rest." 2 weeks after Mike began studying Hebrew, the teacher called and said she didn't feel Mike was capable of learning what was required of him, and she requested that he be withdrawn from class. I remember what Joan said. He will have a bar mitzvah. We just have to figure out the rest. So after evaluating the material, I decided to accept the job of his Hebrew tutor. To hell with her, I thought. If she won't teach him, I will. This is my father, by the way. And he continued on to say, when I spoke to Mike about my plan to teach him the strange new language, Mike asked, "Do you know Hebrew?" I said, "No, but we can learn it together. How does that sound to you?" Mike said, "That sounds great. When do we start?" Within 2 months, Mike learned the story of Joseph in Hebrew and the English translation. On his bar mitzvah day, he read the Hebrew and translation perfectly. Why? Because he memorized it all. Not bad for someone who was told that he wasn't capable of learning. Later in the service, it was time for a speech. 13-year-old Mike placed both arms on the podium, looked straight out to the audience, and began. Joseph was a dreamer. I am a dreamer too. Joseph had problems, and I have some problems too. And just like Joseph, I have some extra abilities. Sometimes people don't get to see my extra abilities because they just can't see past the problems that I have. But I'm happy to say I'm working hard to overcome my problems. I keep trying new things, hang in there, and even when the work is difficult, and even though I have many problems to overcome, I know I will do it because my family is different than Joseph's family. My family loves me, they care about me, they care about what I think and feel, they listen, they encourage and help me, and they are really interested in my hopes and dreams. After Mike was done, my mom and dad got up and spoke. In my father's words, here's what they said. Michael, because of his uniqueness, has created opportunities for us that we might not have otherwise had. Through him, we have learned the true meaning of patience, perseverance, and determination. He has taught us not to take the obvious for granted, for what may be obvious to one person can be incomprehensible to another. We have learned to appreciate and even savor small accomplishments. He has taught us to live in the present rather than wallow in the past or overemphasize the future. I chose to share this because it represented the cadence of many things in Mike's life. He wanted to try. He was told he can't. The family worked together to help him figure out how. He worked. He achieved. That was Mike 44 years ago. Most people, somewhere along the way, might have lost the core of who they are, what they value, and what they want to be remembered for. Not Mike. He held strong to who he was, what he believed. COVID was a rough time for Mike. It was a rough time for all, but particularly for Mike. He loves to hug, high fives. He fed off genuine, in-person connections. So communicating through electronic devices just didn't work for him. But in true Mike fashion, he decided that instead of wasting time, he would take the opportunity to handwrite his autobiography on 98 loose-leaf pages. He handed it to me, patted me on the head as he used to do when I was younger, and said, I want you to have this. That is what came from this. The book is called Uniqueness Counts. And it starts with the acknowledgments. And just like Mike, who repeated himself, why? Because he always wanted to make sure that he was heard. He talked about the 4 groups that he wanted to recognize, and without these groups, I know I would not have gotten the opportunities I did. So it is imperative to acknowledge the groups and begin with my family. When he talked about my sisters and my mom and my dad and me, he thanked us for loving him and standing up for him when there was no way he could have spoken for himself. And in his words, I also want to recognize my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, who all allowed me and encouraged me to be myself. He also said, I want to thank the DePaul Athletics who opened the floodgates for me working all over the city in various capacities in Chicago sports and who cultivated the environment where I could be myself. Also from DePaul, I want to thank Maria and Shannon specifically for their friendship and making me feel like family. My friends, Andy, Megan, Jill, Marla, he always listed everybody, and Pam, Kristen, Kevin, and Kelly also kept me going when few others took the time to understand me. I call this story Uniqueness Counts because of what I value most in myself. What I value most in myself was my biggest obstacle, just being me. This is a story of adversity, heartbreak, setback, struggles, and triumph, both personally and professionally, against all odds. It is designed to inspire, motivate, regardless of the level of adversity an individual might have or come across, to persevere and to come out on top, just like I've done. So I too talked to Mike about his book and his life, and he gave me some similar but some different things. I said, Mike, what do you want people to know about Mike Grossman? He said, well, what came easy for most people in terms of learning and social skills was a struggle for me. It did not come easy. He said, I see people and care for them as they are, not for who I want them to be. I wish more people were able to do that for me. I may not think in the traditional way, but I can communicate and learn as well as anyone if I'm given the chance. I do not and will not let society dictate how I talk, act, think, or express myself. What you see is what you get, he said. Gary, can I tell you something? He said, people think that when I get excited, that I'm out of control and that I can't control my emotions. Not true. I'm not out of control. I'm just proud of sharing my true emotions, and I want people to see what's real. There's nothing false here. Mike and I had a special bond, and I consider it a privilege to share his real words, his true thoughts, and his raw feelings, because all he ever wanted was to be loved and heard. In the Grossman tradition, at a life event, we try to write a letter. So before he passed, I wrote Mike a letter because he didn't always know that he was appreciated. He always made a point to make sure other people were appreciated, but he never knew how much he was appreciated, especially with me, because I spent a lot of my, he always talked about how I was his advocate and I took care of him and I did all these things for him. So I took the opportunity to write him a letter. And this was the core of it. Mike, you always talk about how I've been in your life, but we never talk about how incredibly powerful and invaluable an impact you had on my life. So let's talk about that. Taught me fortitude. No matter what got in your way, you pushed me through with an amazing attitude. True loyalty. Mike, you know more about my life experiences, both good and bad, than anyone else. We lived together for about 10 years, and no matter who asks or how they bribe you, you hold your loyalty true to me. Thank you for always looking out for me and sharing your true thoughts and feelings about things. Trust. Mike, we have a mutual trust that is unmatched. I believe that is the power of that trust that has helped us navigate our way all these years. Even though sometimes the way we communicate may not have been perfect, we trust whatever was being said was meant to help and not hurt. Love. Mike, people talk about love and bond and connection, but no one will ever understand the connection we have and have had over the years that makes us so unique and amazing. Gratitude. Mike, you're amazing at the way you look at a situation, no matter how rough or bleak, to find a way to be grateful for something about it. That is a life lesson for me, for the boys, that is priceless. My life is so rich and successful because I am blessed to have you as my brother. You have always stayed with me through the years, through thick and thin. As my loyal, smart, dynamic, dedicated, loving, resilient brother. You are the platinum standard for friendship. You are the best, and thanks for that.
I'm really sad that I didn't know Mike. Taking time earlier this week to speak with some of the members of his family, to hear the devotion that each of you had to him, and the indescribable impact that he had on your lives and the lives of all of the people he came in contact with is touching and inspiring. I know that I join many who just wish you comfort in the midst of your loss. This Shabbat, Jewish communities across the country, across the world, will read from the beginning of the book of Leviticus. It's a Torah portion about sacrifices. Sacrifices that many of you made to care for him, but that never really felt like a sacrifice. It's, with apologies for another Hebrew lesson, the word for sacrifice, it has within it the root, the same meaning as the word to draw near. And that's what it was. It was a drawing close to one another. Mike's desire to draw close to you and your desire to keep him safe and let him soar. Mike just wanted to reach out to the world, to be seen for who he was, what he could do, and it's just beautiful to hear the way that he cared about you and the way he cared about the people in his ever-expanding circles of concern. And as you said, Mike had more than his fair share of hardships, but he never complained. As you said, victim was extricated from the vocabulary of the family. Gary, I think it was you that said, when we spoke on Sunday, that Mike told you, he said, I had a hard life, but I'm incredibly fortunate. Our sages, they ask, who is the one who is honored? The one who honors others. Who is the one who's wise? One who learns from others. Who is the one who is rich? The one who is happy with his lot. Mike was full of gratitude, appreciation, and acknowledgement. Gratitude didn't just live in him, it burst forth from him. Listing, as you've done, every person, every moment, wanting you to know every single thing that you had done to make his life better and that he wanted to share with you. He was gentle and sweet, with a contagious positivity, a contagious optimism, a contagious sense of unbridled joy. You spoke a great deal about sports and the role that he played in all of the major teams of Chicago. The only 50-50 raffle ticket seller to throw out a first pitch at a Chicago White Sox game because he had won Employee of the Month so many times they couldn't hold the honor from him. Sports were a safe place for Mike, where he could share his enthusiasm, his joy, the motivation and inspiration that sports can bring. Sports made sense. He knew who to be and what to do, and that was celebrated in that space. Because he wanted to inspire people. He wanted that to be what his life was about. He had hardships, but he wanted everyone else's life to be better. He wanted his experience to be one that set the course to a better future for people like him and anyone else who might face any type of struggle or door closed in their face or moment of lack of compassion. He wanted it to be better. And he wanted to show what he could do. One of the examples you shared was the t-shirt business that he had. getting a vendor license and sharing his creativity and his joy for his beloved sports teams. As we spoke, you said that he never understood how big of an impact he had. There was a humility that he had that was both endearing and heartbreaking. He was such an inspiration, such a joy, and he just never knew. This man who poured forth joy and gratitude and appreciation had trouble seeing it for himself. But he knew. He knew that you loved him. He knew that at the center of all of it, the most important thing were his families, the village that raised him, that he gave back to many times over, the special relationships he had with each and every one of you, every sibling, every cousin, every nephew and niece. He knew you. He wanted to spend time with you, whether you shared an interest in sports or not. He found something to share, to celebrate. And then there were his families of choice. Whether it was DePaul, who had a moment of silence at their game on Friday to remember him and all that he had done for that community. It was impossible for him not to make friends. To know him was to love him. And once he knew you, you were in. He had an ambition. An ambition to be seen and be heard for all that he was and all that he could do. And he did so much. A legacy of fortitude, of unconditional optimism, and a real strength. A courage, drive that in spite of the doors closed in his face, he always charged forward. But most core to who he was this incredible kindness, a truth, an earnestness about who he was. He treated people the way that all of us should be treated. He loved the way that all of us should be loved. And because of Mike and because of his family, because of Joan and Jack, thousands of young people won't have to go through some of the hardships that he had. And you have gifts from him, the gifts that Gary just shared with us, his words in his own handwriting, his stories, that all of you are obligated to now, to share, to build a world worthy of Mike. And so that's what we'll do. We'll continue to share his stories and share his attitude about the world and our relationships, to build and strengthen the family that supported him, to love each other the way that he loved you. And when we do that, when we allow memory to live on our lips, memory will become a blessing. Zichrono livracha. May his memory always be for blessing. I invite you to rise for the memorial prayer. El male rachamim shochein bamromim המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת משה בן יעקב, הלל ושנה לאה, שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים, יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Michael M. Grossman, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may his repose be peace. To which we say, Amen. Please be seated.
Friends, ladies and gentlemen, and those of you who are joining us through the live stream, this concludes the services here at the synagogue. The family will be continuing on privately to the cemetery. There will be Shiva this evening and Wednesday beginning at 5:30 through Zoom, and that information is on the service folder that you received when you came into the sanctuary, as well as we have those links available online on our website at chicagojewishfunerals.com. There will also be in-person Shiva with limited availability, but that is also available through our website for you to sign up to reserve a time and to schedule a time for you to be able to see the family in person. The family has also requested that any memorial contributions in Michael's memory be to the DePaul University Athletic Department. Again, that information is in the service folder that you should have received, as well as available on our website. At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the family and the clergy from the sanctuary.